Unlike the rather gloomy year of 2024, the first half of 2025 has already witnessed a wave of spectacular releases that delighted audiences worldwide. From Thunderbolts, Senna, Lilo and Stitch, to the thrilling escapes in Mission Impossible 8. And looking even broader, this summer promises an even denser lineup of blockbusters ready to storm the theaters, like How to Train Your Dragon, 28 Years Later, Fantastic Four, and Superman. It's truly a packed schedule filled with big names already established in the film market. Not to be outdone, the world of John Wick is also stirring, preparing to return to the big screen after 2 years of silence, this time welcoming assassins from the underground once more. But the burden of carrying the franchise forward this time no longer rests on the dog-loving hitman we all know. Instead, audiences will witness a spin-off centered on the ballerina-turned-assassin Rooney Mara as she hunts down the person who murdered her entire family. So what is the connection between this female assassin, played by Ana de Armas, and the legendary John Wick himself? And in such a ruthless world, what can a small, fragile young woman do to survive? All will be answered right here. Although it's introduced as a story set between the events of John Wick 3 and John Wick 4, in reality, Ballerina's tale begins 12 years earlier, when Rooney Mara was still just a little girl. She is the daughter of Javier, a member of the Ruska Roma syndicate, while her mother belonged to a mysterious cult living in a small town in H-Stad. One day, the judge, the leader of the cult, arrives demanding that Rooney be returned, since by the cult's laws, no one is ever allowed to leave freely. Her father's refusal to hand her over costs him his life, while Rooney is taken in by the Ruska Roma and trained to become an assassin. After graduating from the director's training program, one day she discovers someone linked to her father's death years ago. Ignoring all warnings from those around her, she sets out determined to track down her enemy. This reckless choice eventually forces John Wick himself to step in and intervene. Otherwise, the Ruska Roma could drown in a bloodbath. First things first, if a film is to carry the John Wick brand, it must deliver a sufficient dose of chaos and feature bone-crunching, grounded action. So does Ballerina manage to recreate the same intensity that Baba Yaga gave us across the previous 4 films? Fortunately, director Len Wiseman's brainchild fulfills that mission quite well. In fact, this may be considered the film's greatest strength. Though Chad Stahelski, the man who directed the previous 4 John Wick installments, did not helm this one, his involvement as a producer still ensures a certain level of quality. Moreover, even if the script of Ballerina isn't particularly groundbreaking or innovative, Wiseman knows how to pump up excitement with back-to-back action sequences brimming with energy. We still get the signature mix of close-quarters combat and stylish gunplay, all choreographed in a uniquely recognizable way. The film's pacing is quick, wasting no time with long-winded exposition or pointless dialogues. Instead, conversations are kept short and direct, moving smoothly into action sequences that create a suffocating yet exhilarating rhythm. Actress Ana de Armas delivers an impressive transformation, embodying the ferocity necessary for an assassin while still radiating feminine charm. Ballerina also makes excellent use of existing lore from previous John Wick films to further expand the bloody underworld. Instead of focusing solely on the high table, Ballerina offers us a panoramic view of the Ruska Roma, the very syndicate that was once John Wick's home as a youth. In fact, in John Wick 3, when John sought out the director at the theater, we briefly saw a glimpse of this world. The theater trained ballerinas, but also raised them as professional killers. Now, with Ballerina, this world is fleshed out in much greater depth. It's an intriguing perspective, not only revealing Rooney's life, but also indirectly shedding light on John Wick's own upbringing. If you paid close attention in the earlier films, you'd know that rules always come first. More than once, characters emphasize that it is the rules that separate them from beasts. Everyone is bound by the laws of the high table. But what about groups that refuse to follow those rules? What happens to outsiders who defy the hierarchy? Ballerina provides an answer by introducing us to the cult led by the judge. Throughout the movie, however, we actually learn very little about this cult. They live in seclusion, share almost no information, and aside from the distinctive scars on their wrists, no one really knows who they are. While the initial mystery sets up an intriguing atmosphere, I was genuinely curious about who they were and how dangerous they could be, given even Winston and the director were wary of them. Unfortunately, the actual impact of these antagonists ends up being underwhelming. The judge, who was built up as someone even the director feared, leaves almost no lasting impression. Most of his dialogue revolves around predictable themes like cruel fate, choices altering destinies, and destiny being unavoidable. And that's basically it. Nothing surprising follows. He simply sits around issuing orders for his men to chase Rooney through the village. In addition, actor Norman Reedus doesn't get much to work with. Known for his beloved role in The Walking Dead, his involvement in the trailer had fans buzzing, with many speculating he would play a villain as memorable as Santino D'Antonio from John Wick 2 or Marky Vincent from John Wick 4. Sadly, his role as Daniel Pike falls short of those expectations. His character is hunted for betrayal, which should have set him up as an important ally in Rooney's revenge quest. Instead, all we get are a few lines of exposition at the Continental Hotel, a short fight scene, and then he's shown bedridden, recovering from his wounds. This was quite disappointing, especially since his character was supposed to serve as the link between Rooney and the cult. Perhaps this is just an introduction to a larger role in future films, similar to how Winston and the director were once brief cameos before becoming more developed figures. If this was indeed the filmmaker's intent, then Rooney's storyline could well expand into a parallel saga running alongside John Wick's within the same universe. That said, these are really the only points I can complain about in Ballerina, because overall, the film is a feast, a blood-soaked banquet of action sequences in the truest sense. Rarely do we see shootouts with flamethrowers staged on such a massive scale, or watch a petite woman taking on dozens of hulking male assassins. What I especially appreciated was that the filmmakers didn't try to artificially buff Rooney's strength. Instead, they emphasized the inherent disadvantages women face when fighting towering muscular men. Fight like a girl is the advice she repeatedly hears during training. Not as an insult, but as a mantra to turn her weaknesses into her ultimate weapon. Rooney is clearly not as invincible as John Wick. She doesn't always blaze through rooms with endless bullets. She takes hits, gets beaten down, and in many moments, the audience can see raw helplessness in her eyes. That vulnerability makes her more human and earns her deeper empathy from viewers. Another highlight for me is how the John Wick franchise continues to underline the weight of choices. Fate may seem predetermined, but when standing at the crossroads, every choice leads to different consequences. Rooney, much like John, refuses to accept a destiny imposed on her. She struggles against the mesh of fate, grasping even the faintest shred of hope. Of course, many will wonder if Ballerina will receive a sequel. At the moment, Lionsgate has not confirmed whether Rooney's story will be extended. But based on the ending and the open threads it leaves behind, it seems the studio is indeed keeping that door open. Who knows? Perhaps by the time John Wick 5 arrives, we'll even see Rooney fighting side by side with John himself. In summary, Ballerina still has a few shortcomings, but overall, it remains a film worth experiencing. Even if stripped away from the John Wick universe, it still holds its own with a unique appeal. That wraps up everything I wanted to say about Ballerina, the spin-off from the John Wick world. There's a lot more to talk about, but I'll stop here to avoid spoiling the entire movie for you. Trust me, if you love adrenaline-pumping action, sequences, or if you're captivated by the violent underworld of John Wick, then Ballerina will give you some intense emotions. And with that, goodbye, and I wish you all a great movie-watching experience. Bye-bye.